this. Okay, 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome everybody. Stand by 10 seconds. I've got a couple of more pieces of technology I have to manage here real quick. Welcome everybody. This is Toby Milroy here again, Vice President for AMS, and thanks so much for tuning in for our monthly sort of Google Hangout webinar, teleconference, all pieces of technology rolled together, I guess, into one big thing. I'm really kind of excited about our time together today. We have a lot to talk about, but one of the things that I think is so important as martial artists is, you know, we all love what we do so much, right? We all love teaching martial arts. We all love the results that we get for our students. And one of the things that remains quite under leveraged in my view for most martial arts schools when you look around the country is what we do is so interesting to the media. It's so interesting to the press. And so many of our martial arts school operators, our clients and others have such a hard time sort of penetrating that, right? And today we're joined with two absolute masters in this area, Master Jeff and Renee Battenberg. And I'm honored to have them on the line with us today. They've been able to, over the last just couple of years, in fact, I mean, you've been doing this for a very long time, but just over the last couple of years, as I mentioned on the landing page that you may be looking at, have been able to generate, I'm pulling through the articles here, you know, I don't know, 4 or 5 cover stories, a few stories in the health section, a few stories in the sports section, a couple of community section stories, and that's just the newspaper. We're going to talk a little bit about television and radio today as well. But so this is one of those areas that in the martial arts business and the martial arts industry, we under leverage very frequently. And it's one of the things that can really be a big catalyst in the growth of a martial arts school. So Masters Battenberg, I guess, thank you guys so much for taking the time with us today. We're looking forward to this and kind of walking through what you've done to accomplish all this and how it's serving your community.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. We are a little bit technology constrained today. We've got Masters Battenberg on the telephone. We weren't able to get the video feed working, so you'll have to suffer through me on the camera, but we'll be able to hear them. So guys, if you could real quick, you know, we've known each other actually for quite a while, but for folks who aren't familiar with you guys and don't know what you've been up to, we'll talk about the school in a minute, but if you could just give me a quick thumbnail so everybody kind of understands your martial arts background. You guys have been doing martial arts for a very long time, and just sort of, you know, kind of underline that for us. You know, what got you into the martial arts? Where did you start? How long have you been doing this? What does all that look like?
Well, I actually started back in 1972. My father was in the Air Force, and so I had the opportunity to join a little martial arts school there, and just over the years have just kind of stuck with it until I got into college, and at that point I just kind of decided that I wanted to make a career down the road with it. So I was kind of inspired back by Bruce Lee back at that time, but have just kind of stuck with it. Once I moved to Kingwood back in 1987. I started in my garage and just kind of lived the dream. You know, didn't have to have much, but I knew in my heart that this is what I wanted to do, is to share martial arts with others. And so we've just kind of stuck with it, and I'm just as passionate today as I was, you know, back when I was a little girl.
And to tag off of that, 30 years ago, this year actually, was our 30th year in martial arts. I started training with my now wife. She was my original instructor as a senior in high school. I ended up going to college at North Texas up in Dallas, and then came back years later, and took about 2 years before I figured out I needed to ask her out. And it was a very odd, interesting embarkment, but it's literally the history of the school. We've been around now for 30 years here in Kingwood. Has gone from everything, having multiple schools, multiple locations, sold those, to one big location, owning a building, actually selling that building after we moved into a different area of Kingwood, and it kind of brings us up till now. We have a business towards the front of Kingwood. If you imagine a city, like we're in the city of Houston, we're the northeast side, we're a suburb of Houston, so any major city, the suburbs around it. We actually moved towards the front of Kingwood so that we would be highway accessible for our people that we're going to be talking about today, our students that are traveling upwards of an hour and a half each direction twice a week to come train with us. And we're talking dozens of them that make tricks 45, 50 an hour, an hour long each way, because they see the benefits of what they are doing.
Yeah, three things in there that are kind of buried in there that we'll discuss another day. But keep in mind for all of our folks who are, participating with us today, you guys have sort of lived an interesting martial arts business life cycle as well, and one that not a lot of us in the industry have accomplished very much, which is going from multi-school organization to being able to, for lack of a better description, create a business as a true asset, an asset enough that's sellable, right, or saleable, and then actually accomplishing that, right? And this has a lot to do with, and we'll talk about real estate at some other point in the future as well. But again, many and most martial artists who operate schools oftentimes forget the first lesson that Steve Covey would teach, which is begin with the end in mind, right? And at some point in your martial arts career, you're going to want to have an equity event, or you're going to want to, build schools and locations that other people can run, or that other people can create their careers with. And you guys have been able to do that. So that's, again, a topic for another day, but something very interesting, I think, for everybody watching and listening. These guys know their stuff, right? They're very sophisticated and successful business operators. So currently right now, maybe walk me through the school. You're about 4,500 square feet currently in the current location that you're in. And, tell us a little bit about that, like the current school location, how that works. And then we want to sort of get into our main topic today on how you've been able to accomplish so much media attention. Did I lose you? It's entirely possible that you're now muted again somehow. Okay, how about now?
Okay, I'm back unmuted.
Okay, I have no idea what's going on, but I'll fix it. I'll keep fixing it.
That's all right. You fixed it pretty instantly.
So if you could walk through again, like where the current location is and how that looks.
Yes, sir. We have a 4,500 square foot studio now. We came from a 7,500 square foot building that we had put on a soft sale, which is where you have it on the real estate market, but don't put a sign out in front for several years. As you just mentioned, for the equity and the business asset portion. We moved into this 4,500 square foot with only 6 windows in the front of it. We're in a corner space, so if you look from the outside, we put a big sign on the outside, but if you just looked at the location, it would look small until you walked in, because we're not relying on foot traffic. We have enough students as we are. It's more word of mouth. We run 5 programs from Cubs, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, karate for kids, taekwondo for teens and adults, Tai Chi program, fitness kickboxing, and a Tai Chi program, as well as our Rock Steady Boxing, which is the non-contact boxing program for people with Parkinson's. As you walk into our school, there is a separation, which we have not had before, of the floor to the lobby, actual, glass between the two with openings instead of doors, which allow for access and also for the student focus. And really just a small conference room, small office, kind of lean and mean. We did what you had mentioned that we'll do in possibly another conference. You build with the end in mind, and now we can run in a very efficient business with exactly what our needs are. And our school was actually built for the Rock Steady program, our floor, to be able to run it like stations. If you imagine a 9-round or some circuit-based fitness facility, that's kind of how we run a Rock Steady program. And of course, all martial artists benefit from all the equipment that we brought in as well.
Right. So yeah, and I think I hate to underline it 3 times, but again, there's sort of this life cycle in the martial arts entrepreneur's life, right? And at some point, the ability to build equity in a business and actually sell it for something even close to its intrinsic value is pretty difficult to do. And these guys have done a great job of that on several occasions now. So I think it's definitely something to be considerate of. What is this business going to look like in the next 20 years when you decide you want to retire, right? These are things that all of our folks, all of our clients should be thinking about. like, every day, frankly. So let's kind of jump in a little bit here. So you guys have implemented some programming in your martial arts school that has been not only instrumental in changing people's lives, but has been a really big catalyst for getting, I'm kind of showing some of these articles again, for getting some of this really, really, really good press in your community. Let's walk through that kind of step by step. Talk to me a little bit about what Rocksteady is, how does it work, and then we'll get into kind of the press component of this.
Well, Rocksteady Boxing, it's basically a program that enables people that have Parkinson's disease, kind of gives them an opportunity to fight that disease by providing a non-contact, kind of a boxing-style program. And what we're finding out that it's doing is it's really not only improving the quality of their life, but it's kind of giving them some self-worth. And their motor function, they're walking better, their balance is better, and we have seen that now almost 3 years into the program, some miraculous results. Because what happens is when somebody with Parkinson's, it attacks the different areas of their body, and by reducing that dopamine that's in the brain, and that dopamine acts as a neurotransmitter, which is what transmits the signals from our brain to our muscles for our movement. When that starts to die, it basically kills off the neural pathways. And so what our job is with the Rocksteady Boxing program is that we want to try to kind of rewire or re-stimulate some new neural pathways by overloading the senses. One way we do that is just by putting on those gloves that weigh a pound. We work on footwork, we're striking pads, we're hitting those multiple senses at the same time, which is stimulating the brain chemistry. All in all, basically what we're doing is just by incorporating large movements using the whole body and the upper body, using footwork, using punches, using what we know through the martial arts, it's creating that forced intense exercise, and that's where we're getting the result. And that forced intense exercises again is where they're going beyond, the traditional exercise. So it's awesome to see these guys walking out after their first class and already feeling a difference.
And to segue that into the media, as martial artists, we inherently know what works and what doesn't. And if somebody asks, could you give me a white paper or quantify why this black belt is a good fighter, you kind of shake your head as a martial artist. You just look at him and you say, well, go fight him or watch him fight. He's a good fighter. You can tell that it works. You don't have to have a piece of paper. And when we started the Rocksteady, we didn't have very much science behind it, but we saw the people being literally fixed. Arms that had stopped working because of the neural pathways that were gone. And after a month of training, they now have almost full function of their arm. So the effect that you have when you're creating that much of an impact, you can now talk to media, and it's not a sports story now. It's a human interest story. And that's kind of where you saw most of those newspaper articles were from the last couple of years. It's through not only this Rocksteady Boxing, it's through being creative in what you do and how can I make this a human interest story. I think most martial artists think, okay, we got a black belt, somebody earned their black belt, so let me send that into the paper. Well, just about every martial arts school could do that or should be able to do that at some point in time. It doesn't excite a newspaper very much because you have to look at it from the newspaper's side. They need to fill their space with quality material that matters to everyone. I mean, yes, it's an interesting idea or thought. Oh, that person got a black belt. That's great. But most people think of it and go, that's not me. And they don't necessarily go, well, I want to go join that school because they trained somebody to be a black belt. If you look at a human interest or how you can work in a community or an inspirational story, now you can talk to a newspaper and they appreciate the fact that you're bringing them something of true interest. One of the newspapers that I sent you is a friend of ours, Alex Flynn, that we've met through this. He is a young onset Parkinson's person. He was afflicted when he was 34, I think is when they found out he had Parkinson's. And he has since he did a 10 million meter run. He has done some things that are almost unimaginable physically, all with Parkinson's, just to prove you can do this even with Parkinson's. When we took that human interest story to Melanie at our local newspaper, she was there the next day, and I called Alex and said, be in class the next day because Melanie's going to do an interview with you, and she reached out to ABC News. So it all works together, but it kind of goes back to the original. You have to think of the human interest, and you have to have relationships with your media. If you don't know, and this is like key point for any martial arts school, if I call a martial arts school and I said, who is your local paper, or what is the local paper, you'll know that. Now, who is the local editor? Who is the sports editor? Who is the best reporter? Who does human interest stories? If you can't answer those, or you don't know who to contact, how are you ever going to get your name out in the true community without having that relationship? I'm actually looking at a T-shirt, and if the video was working, I was going to show you because I hung it on my TV, but then my wife didn't like it. She put it away. But it's the T-shirt that I'm going to take Melanie, because Melanie Fuke is one of our go-to reporters. If we have a true human interest story, when I text Melanie, she immediately lets me know when to come back, when to get back to her. And I'm going to take her this T-shirt for no reason except it's a school shirt, and I'm not asking her for anything. I'm just developing a relationship, and I'm doing it today after we get off of this video conference call, because I would love to be able to follow up and say, here's what happened, and here's how she reacted, just by giving a T-shirt.
Right. So listen, there's a ton of stuff in there that we need to sort of underscore. First is this, I think, in my view, is this. I think you said it exactly right, and this is the thing to write down before we dig even deeper into how this particular program can benefit these particular students. When we're talking about media specifically, and in any negotiation, it doesn't matter what it is, it's all about what's in it for them, not you. Right? So when we're talking about the media, when you're talking about how to get press coverage, whether it's newspaper, television, radio, whatever the case might be, Master Battenberg said something pretty interesting. They have a ton of space they have to fill every day, right? There's an old movie called, I think it's called The Newspaper. And I think it was like a Robert Redford movie or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. But it's just kind of like a day in the life of a newspaper. And man, the amount of column inches that they have to fill and the amount of time on television that they have to fill every day is kind of intimidating, right? But they don't want to, but it has to be something that's interesting for them, for their readers. They want their readers to be engaged in the paper. They want their readers to be, or their viewers or listeners to be engaged in their content. So just because your school, like you said, has a tournament, well, I mean, maybe there's some interest in there if there's something special going on. But, just because somebody earned their black belt, or just because your instructor is coming in from Korea or something like that to teach, I mean, why is that interesting or attractive to their readers, their viewers? It's interesting to us. It's the world to us, but what's in it for their readers, right? So you always have to be thinking about that when you're working with these guys. It's a relationship just like any other. It's not just about what you can do for me. It's how I can help you accomplish your objectives, right? So I think that's the big key that you mentioned is, stories typically fall into a couple of categories. One is, newsworthy, meaning if it bleeds, it leads, right? So who got shot, who got in a car accident, who got killed, right? I mean, unfortunately, that's the case. Or the second category is human interest stories. And that's, I think, again, what you're describing with these types of, this type of a program specifically, the human interest angle to this Rocksteady program, this ability to make such an impact on students who have Parkinson's disease is a huge human interest story. Now, there's certainly many others that we have the ability to leverage in martial arts as well, but this one is of high degree of leverage. So let's drill into that angle a little bit more. You were describing the sort of, I don't want to say instantaneous, but fast results that you're seeing with this thing. Walk us through that. So if a new student is starting in this program, what are you seeing?
Well, let's back it up one step and let's put ourselves in the shoe of somebody that has Parkinson's. They find out they have Parkinson's, or they find out that their loved one has Parkinson's, and they get online like everybody else does, and they Google search it, and they try to figure out, what do I do? What's a cure. You know, is there a cure? There is no cure. It's very depressing. It's when you look at it, if you don't know where to look, you pretty much stop looking, and that's kind of where we step in. Our goal is to let everybody realize that no, you can stave off the progression of Parkinson's through forced intense exercise. And the biggest hurdle we have is somebody thinking that they can't do it, which we don't have in the martial arts. There is no hurdle. Everybody that wants to do the martial arts, not everybody, but many people, they've been excited about trying it their whole life. For somebody that has Parkinson's, it's a matter of explaining to them, just come to one class. You don't think that they can experience anything in one class because it's just one class. But when they get to that class and they feel the synergy of the class, and then we explain to them how we're going to call them their cornermen, their caretakers, their loved ones, whoever's there with them, have been asking them to stand straight or to not shuffle, or, you know, they see the signs of Parkinson's, and we tell them, bring your knees high. And all of a sudden they stand up taller and they march. By just saying the word march or thinking of march instead of telling somebody you're leaning over, it triggers a different autonomic response, and they walk better. In 5 seconds, they could walk better. And the change is almost instant. Now, it doesn't last. They go back in, you know, they revert to muscle memory, and it is a process that they have to, but they can see that instantaneous result with almost everybody that walks in.
And well, on the other side of that too, the group dynamic of our class is so motivating for these boxers. You know, being in one place with so many people that have Parkinson's, it's very encouraging. And there's just kind of a special camaraderie, you know, with everyone. Everybody there is fighting back, but they're still caring for each other, and everybody's supporting each other. So it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. And I certainly love my martial arts. I love all of, you know, teaching that program. You know, as I was mentioning earlier, it's when you teach the martial arts, you know, sometimes it's years later before you get to experience the results, or you see the impact that you made on some of these smaller children. With the Rock Steady program, it's immediate reward, because again, they are walking better, they're moving better. My mom lives with me. I take care of her, and she was my first boxer. We've had 94 boxers come through our program since we started it. And so I live with Parkinson's every day, but I also know that had she not taken the Rock Steady class that we do, she just does it twice a week, I know that she would have progressed much, much more into the Parkinson's. And so, you know, it's a blessing that we have this program available. And they're all over now. They're all over. But how great it is for martial arts schools to be able to implement this into their program. It's very fulfilling.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we want to drill into a little bit of the mechanics here too, but I think to kind of underscore what you're describing, and from, you know, past conversations that we've had, these are folks who, in many cases, are hopeless, right? There isn't anything, you know, I don't know. I guess you could, you know, find some junk science somewhere to support some drug or, you know, supplement or something like that. But there isn't anything that has this type of an immediate big impact on folks who have this disease. And once diagnosed with this thing, I'm gonna correct me if I say anything wrong, because I'm gonna try to recast part of our conversation, Master Battenberg, from the other day. My recollection of our conversation was, once someone is diagnosed with this thing, they have sort of a one-way path, and that's to progress deeper and deeper and deeper into this disease, right? And that means physically they, for lack of a better description, atrophy more and more and more over time. And frankly, what you guys are doing is like stopping that, and in most cases, like reversing it. I mean, this sounds too good to be true, but is that an accurate statement?
It is an accurate statement, and I'm sure that all of the people that are watching this are very adept at Neurology Now magazine, or they get that in their monthly.
Yes, subscription, right? Yeah.
One of our students that just joined a few classes ago was at his neurologist's, and his wife was reading Neurology Now, the October-November edition, as she was waiting for him to get his results. And it is a 4-page spread on Parkinson's on the Ropes, all about Rocksteady boxing and how the boxing is actually proving to be an effective reducer of the symptoms and reversal of some of the symptoms. And if you think of a doctor or medical magazine to have a 4-page spread, you couldn't buy that sort of advertising. And it is proving that what we've known, as I stated, a while ago inherently, we know that people are getting fixed. We don't know necessarily how or why. We see the results, and now they can quantify the results, which is why on the business side of it, the retention level is extremely high. There's very little attrition. When they come and they see results, they continue. Once they've gone a year, we just had one of our boxers today that says, my dentist invited me to come to one of their fairs because they want to promote Rocksteady. And I said, you're what? They said, my dentist. And I'm like, do you hang out with your dentist? No. But they could see just while I'm laying in their chair that I'm more alert.
Yeah, I mean,
it's one of those. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had a delay there. I thought perhaps you'd gone muted again. No, I think again, I think this is one of those scenarios where, when you live it every day and you see this stuff happen every day, I think, Renee, your comment I think is exactly right. With a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, we make a huge impact on those folks, and it takes a really long time to see concrete results, and from everything I've read so far, from everything I've experienced so far, from what you guys are doing with this program, this is as close to snake oil as you get, right? I mean, this is as close to the real thing as you get. Like you wouldn't believe this if you didn't see it with your own 2 eyes. You wouldn't believe this if you didn't see the stories from all these folks who are going through this. I mean, do you get that type of feedback?
Well, I have one of my boxers just turned 89, and his neurologist asked us to videotape the class. And he wanted me to send that to him. Of Ken is the boxer's name. He says because he's down, he's doing a drop and he's doing a roll, he's jogging. He says this is unbelievable. I've never experienced anything like this with my patient as a neurologist. So it's so exciting, and that's why the media just kind of jumps on this, because what person wouldn't want to tell their grandkids, well, I'm going to boxing instead of going to therapy classes. Right. It's just something that's intriguing. Everybody wants to hear about, how people are boxing that are in their mind older or have a disease. So it's just such a great thing. And we get people that are calling us asking to come volunteer. We have no shortage of volunteers, unpaid volunteers that just want to be a part of it. Whether they're widows who just lost their husband and they want to be involved in something, or, my 2 boys are 18, they're twins. They come and they volunteer during the day too. It's unbelievable how many people drive an hour to just be a part of this program. So it's just, I can't say enough about it, and how important it is to consider something like this to build a spread into the communities.
Yeah, so let's drill into that a little bit. Let's drill into the business dynamics of this as well. I mean, obviously, this is wonderful soul food, right? And I think all of us, there aren't many folks, I think, in the martial arts industry who decide to get into the industry just because there's a way to make $1 there, right? I mean, any one of us, between the 3 of us, any one of us could make a lot more money doing other things, right? Almost all of us get into this thing because it's made such an impact in our life, and we think that we can now impact other people as deeply as we've been. And so, having said that, this is wonderful soul food. This is wonderful. When you drive home at night, you feel wonderful about what you've done with your day. But let's also talk about the business dynamics too. So talk to me a little bit about, I guess I would contrast this, and I would say this is not like a typical add-on little fitness thing or little kickboxing program where the attrition rate is astronomical and the tuition is very low, right? This is more like a traditional martial arts student, right? Walk me through the dynamics of that and how you have that set up.
Sure. This is we consider it premium time. Now, it's held in the mornings. We hold Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday mornings because somebody with Parkinson's, their battery kind of drains throughout the day. So it is best to be held in the mornings, which obviously for martial arts schools, mornings are typically their slowest time anyway. Now, that does mean that an instructor would have to go in and actually train in the morning. Which I know that there are some people who might balk at that, but you don't get something without giving. Anyway, but we put it and we priced it basically as a student that's coming 2 or 3 times a week anyway. What one of our martial arts students would pay us. There are no upgrades. There's no, you get to join a different club at a different time. It's come up with your number and stick with that number. Renee mentioned earlier, we've been 94 that have tried or joined our program. We were the first one in Houston, actually the first one in Texas, to have a Rocksteady location. It's an affiliated program. It's not a franchise, and they have no jurisdiction on anything. They have no requirements. Somebody could open a Rocksteady next door to us. I think that they would think otherwise, but they could. So with that, we now have 5 Rocksteady locations in the greater Houston area. We've probably had 12 to 15 of our boxers go to different locations just because it is closer to them, and which to us is fine. I mean, if they're going to train more and stick with it, that's great. We have currently 59 that are active, and of those 59, I'm going to say that there are 47 to 48 that are actually paying, because one of the problems that we kind of run into is when we see how effective it is and how much it helps somebody. When someone comes to us that has Parkinson's that doesn't have the means or ability to pay what our premium prices are, we gift it to them, or we give them whatever they can afford, and we let them pay that amount, because we know that they can't get this anywhere else. It's the cheapest medicine that they'd ever have, but that's a personal decision that every instructor would have to make. But we have no problem gifting those that need it, and feel that that's kind of our obligation, having found something that is as close to a cure as possible. And those are some of the most loyal students that we'll ever have.
Yeah,
I cause is definitely worthy.
Oh my God, yeah, right. Well, and I think that dynamic is particularly compelling. I mean, again, we're looking at this sort of with 2 different lenses. You've got sort of the actually probably 3 lenses, but one, you've got what I'm doing is frankly just amazing work with an amazing group of people that wouldn't have this opportunity otherwise. Then on the other side of the fence, I mean, again, if this can reduce someone's dependence on medication, or this can reduce their dependence on other types of therapies and things like that, I think you just said it, but it's the cheapest medication they're ever going to find, right? I mean, this healthcare system just keeps going, kind of spiraling down the drain here quickly. But I mean, it's a huge win-win scenario. I mean, I don't see, and again, the tuition that you're charging is just like a regular student. So this isn't, where I'm blocking out a bunch of prime time during my evening classes, and I'm then not monetizing that time well, right? This is sort of dead time anyway, but it's monetized well. I mean, that's always been my concern. Please.
I'm sorry. And I have to tell you, Toby, that, going in and teaching classes in the evening time, I wouldn't do anything else. I mean, you could pay me to do another profession. I've chose this, and I'm so blessed. I wake up loving what I do every day. I honestly do. When we thought about doing the morning Rocksteady classes, right when we began the program, or before we started it actually, thinking of going in the morning for a couple of hours and then knowing I was going to come back in the evening time, I thought, is that going to burn me out a little bit? I don't want to get burned out and coming up and teaching at night. But I have to tell you, I am fired up. I get up in the morning early. I get up here. I set up my obstacle courses. I get everything ready for those boxers, because when they show up, they're so excited about what they're about to do, that they're so excited about the class. They love the music. They love the energy of the class. And then everybody there, we don't talk medication. We wrap up, we put boxing gloves on, and we box. And that's the mentality, and I just want to be a part of that. I can't wait to get up there and set that up for them. So, for those that are thinking about, I don't want to add more classes or put more time on my schedule, it's unbelievable. It really does. It makes me feel more worthy, to do for others.
Yeah, well, and again, I to highlight it again, I guess a third time, but this isn't like I'm just layering on, a low revenue process. I mean, this is something that can be a really, profitable program. So I think it's fantastic. Okay, so let's kind of tie back through some of the media connections here. So I think there's sort of like two underlying sort of media lessons here. One is this connection to human interest stories, right? So where press and publications and television and radio, they're really looking for the feel-good story occasionally. Now, certainly they want, certainly if it bleeds, it leads, right? And certainly they've got, staff reporters who are always on call for that stuff and in the helicopter, right? But these types of human interest stories tend to be very compelling for users and readers and listeners as well. So you kind of have that angle, right? You've got that sort of built into this thing, and one should always be thinking in the martial arts school about how to tie that into what they're doing, right? So, what are interesting human interest stories that are happening in your school? One specific, just out of the blue, that popped into my head a second ago. We had a child in one of our programs who beat neuroblastoma. She beat brain cancer, right? And she ended up earning, I think she went all the way through second, maybe third degree black belt with us. And I mean, those types of things are really compelling stories for papers. So, just because you're having a tournament or just because you're, someone achieved their black belt, unless there's sort of that angle there, sometimes it's not as compelling, right? So you want to be on the outlook for those angles. The other part, I think that the underpinning sort of lesson here is what you're really trying to do. There's no one event that's going to promise or guarantee that the media is going to show up and cover you. There's no one thing there's no lever that you can switch. But what there is a bunch of little levers, and all those little levers add up to basically being a pillar in your community, right? And so let's sort of back into this one a little bit. You guys are doing an awful lot of stuff out in the community, including Rocksteady, but also apart from that, that have helped you get what I call Rolodex status, right? When you have Rolodex status with your local media, that means you sort of become the go-to person whenever, I'm sure you've had this happen, whenever a story comes up about self-defense, or a story that comes up about children, or about children, child protection or things like that. You sort of pop up in their mind because they know you. They like you and they trust you, and they know that you're an expert in your field. And you guys are doing all sorts of stuff in the community to help support that. I know, Master Battenberg, you were describing to me that you're the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce and things like that, right? Like, how are you sort of circling the wagons to make sure that you're sort of an unmissable force in the community? And I'll bet you're muted. Let's try now. Can you hear me?
I'm unmuted now.
You are unmuted
yes,
now.
Sir. One of the things that any martial artist can use to help elevate their status is making sure that they are around the people that they want to be around, and known in the community for that. You mentioned the Chamber of the Board for Chamber of Commerce. Very, very good friends with the president of the Chamber of Commerce. Very good friends with pros over at the local country club. We're a golfing community here in Kingwood. We have 3 country clubs, and one thing that any martial artist could do to elevate their own status is pick the top 10 people in their community. Pick the top 10 businesses, restaurants. If there's a car dealership that's a huge car dealership, there's a big, we have Insperity, which used to be Administaff. It's a huge company. Take the owner, just take him out to lunch, and set up 5 lunches in a week. 2 weeks, you've taken the 10 most powerful people in your community, and you've just taken them to lunch and got to know them, and just tell your story, who you are, what you do, how you can benefit people that they might know, and what could you do for them. And just by edifying those people, you then become somebody that they are happy to refer people to. And that's the same in media relations. You have to know somebody, not just call them when you need something.
Yeah, I can't remember. I remember it happening. I wish I could remember specifically this has been a while, but one of my mentors at a distance, that was sort of the project that I had to sort of undertake when I was very young in operating schools. And my job was to do exactly that. It was $1 millionaire a week. I had to take $1 millionaire a week out to lunch. And, you know, of course, my first initial gut reaction is, well, how the hell am I going to do that? Right? How am I going to get, you know, and at the time, my first target was the president of the biggest real estate company in town. He's a big real estate developer, and also they had agencies as well, but mostly they were home builders, right? And I'm like, well, how am I going to do that? And really the answer is you just show up. You know, the hardest thing to get rid of in the world is a body. So you just turn up, and I sat in the waiting room, and I said, I'm here to see, you know, Mr. You know, Morgan. Okay, do you have an appointment? No. Okay. So I sat in the chair and waited till he came out of the office. I mean, no big deal, right? But yeah, I think that's a huge opportunity that we don't want to miss. I oftentimes call it digging deep roots in the community. And what you're trying to do is certainly surround yourself with the people who can benefit you the most and who you can then benefit. But 100% of this stuff is about relationship, right? You know, penetrating elementary schools. There's no magic wand that is going to get all the elementary schools to suddenly want to help you promote your program. But there are a lot of little pieces of fairy dust that you can pick up along the way. And if you just know everybody, you know, my staff, I used to force them to drive a different route to the school every morning, right? So that they could see different businesses. They could see different, I'm not sure what that is. They could see different businesses and experience different new stores that were opening, new businesses that might have been closing, or whatever, things like that. I also forced them to go to all the elementary schools and pull the calendar out of the box by the receptionist's office and go meet the receptionist and make sure they knew who that person was and was on a first name basis with them, and bring them cookies a couple of times a year, things like that. So what you're describing, I think, is critically important when it comes to how to generate media coverage. You just have to know everybody. You have to make sure that you have this Rolodex status. You have this status with them that you're a resource for them when they need to get something accomplished. So let me tag one more thing onto this. And anybody who's watching or listening right now, there is a bit of an art to preparing press releases as well. And I'm not sure how much of this was a direct result of doing specific releases rather than just kind of getting a hold of people. But there is a specific language that you have to learn how to write in when you write a press release. And I'm happy to, I have a bunch of samples of these things that have been very successful over the years. Anybody just put your email address in the comment section over here, and I'll send you copies of those things. There are certain, characters that you have to use. You always end it with 3 pound signs, and, for immediate release, there's some formatting and some structure that you want to make sure you use. And if you don't use the right format, if you don't use the right structure, you're sort of immediately revealing yourself to media agencies that you don't know what you're doing. You're not one of them, right? You're sort of out of sync with them. And that's not necessarily always a deal killer, but certainly if you look the way they want you to look, if the release is structured the way that they're used to seeing them, it helps them to write their article easier and better and more, frankly, to your benefit and your advantage. So anybody who wants a copy of that, I'd be happy to put that down there. Just pop your email address in the comment section, and I'll send those over out to you. I think the other piece of it, and I wonder how much of this that you've that has been useful for you, but tagging into other stories that are already happening in the community, right? So if there was a story about, I always use this negative example only because it tends to be a little bit polarizing, but if there's a story about an attempted abduction in your area, well, I don't want to use tragedy necessarily as, a way to, try to commercialize it. But if that's already what's in the public consciousness, if people are already thinking about that, if people are already worried about that, if people are already sort of thinking about that problem, then when you can be part of the solution, I think that helps you garner the media's attention. It helps you garner those, the ability to help leverage those stories and to help serve the community by helping solve those things. Maybe you guys could expand on that. Anything specifically that you've sort of helped to leverage in the community that has helped sort of carry this ball forward that you can think of? And you're probably muted again. I have no idea why or how, but you're now not.
All right. You said a couple of key key points that I want to kind of trigger off of. The first one, back on the press releases, if somebody doesn't take advantage of that, then they're just trying to recreate the wheel or reinvent the wheel, and it really does them a disservice. If you can come across the most professional, the quickest with your media, it does put you at another level. The second thing was on, if there was an abduction or if there's news is current news. And if you can be a solution to the current news, then you're not, misusing anything. You're actually helping educate a formerly uneducated public. Our Ladies Self-Defense, our workshop that we do, our phones blow up every time that there's an event that happens in our area. And it's unfortunate, but it's just the way that they get busy. And what we make sure to do is, if we, use an event to stimulate a seminar, then we'll do a follow-up story with the seminar and try to get those people not only to re-attend, but bring somebody else that they know, so that it's an ongoing flow, and it is more in the person's mind or in the community's mind than just when an event happens.
Yeah, and from the media's standpoint, by the way, this is a little bit of inside baseball here, but from a media standpoint too, keep in mind that all these news agencies are also competing with each other, and the one thing they don't want to do is get scooped, right? They don't want somebody to be covering a story that they didn't know about or that they don't have content for, right? So, for example, in that example, if something negative like that were to happen in the community, everybody's going to try to be covering it, and they're all looking for a different angle to bring to that story. And so one of the things that puts us in a highly leveraged position is, let's use Rocksteady as an example. Let's say that there were a story in the news about, an improvement that someone made through this type of a program. Well, this now incentivizes basically all the other news agencies to cover similar stories, which then puts us in a position to go get in front of that train, right? To go get in front of where that herd is going to be. So don't miss that, right? What's in the public consciousness, what the news is covering, the rest of the news wants to be covering as well. And that gives you an opportunity to tag on to that and leverage those opportunities as well.
Well, and for us, we've been very fortunate. The Kingwood community and the surrounding communities have jumped on it. We've had probably 4 different articles over time, that just come out and talk about the Rocksteady. But when word got to the Houston Chronicle, which covers all of Houston, they ended up coming out and put us on the front page of the sports section, because and it was a huge page, full color, with one of our ladies boxing.
Yeah, so I've got it. By the way, I've got it right here. I've got it on camera right here. And this is again a little bit inside baseball, but this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 5 columns by, I don't know, 6 inches, 8 inches, something like that. So that's probably a $50,000 media buy. If you wanted to pay for an ad that size, something like that. I don't know, smaller page. But,
to jump off of that one, when we knew that the Chronicle was doing the story, we went ahead and called our contacts at ABC 13 to do a news story. So we had the Chronicle in 1 week, and then 2 weeks following, we had Christina Dobbins, one of our local news reporters, who did 2 live news stories from our school. She actually did all her video of the classes in the morning, and then that evening during our regular classes said, live from Battenberg Martial Arts and Fitness, we want to bring you the news on what is happening in our community. And did a 90-second on one and a 120-second, I guess a 300-second. They did it in seconds. Anyway, it was 2 and 4 minutes, something like that, which was, primetime news.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, I mean, again, you can't have the budget to be able to buy that kind of coverage. And again, it's just being sort of sensitive to those things that are ripe, that are ready, that serve their viewer. And these types of deep human interest stories are so compelling. I mean, it's really, this thing does so many things for you. I think it's really something that, that we should be at a higher frequency leveraging in the martial arts community. So I think, by the way, while we're here, rocksteadyboxing.org is the website where you can find out anything you want to about the program specifically. How would you categorize the program specifically to kind of, again, we're going to kind of dovetail back to media as well, but how is executing this program? How would you define that to somebody? Is this primarily the same as teaching a martial arts lesson? Is this kind of like teaching private lessons? How would you categorize that, and how operationally do you execute those classes?
It would be more like teaching a fitness kickboxing program, circuit training, with the proper warm-up, proper cool-down. Now, the Rocksteady method has specific drills that help people with Parkinson's, and that's kind of where you go to Indianapolis. That's where they're headquartered out of for the affiliation. There's a 2-day training camp that in order to have a program you have to go to. It's like $700 for the camp, and then there's an annual affiliation fee, and I think that annual fee is $800. So cost-wise, it's actually not very expensive to get started. Implementation into your school, it's literally an hour and 10-minute class where you're using a boxing ring timer, and you can do either 2-minute rounds with a 1-minute rest, 3-minute rounds with a 1-minute rest. If you want to separate your classes into a more advanced class that has a more advanced version of Parkinson's, or their Parkinson's is more advanced than them, then you would obviously take, shorter rounds, longer rests. And then the ones like the Alex Flynn that I mentioned, he could do 3-minute rounds, 30-second rests, and he could probably do 20 rounds straight. So if you think of it more as a circuit training with proper cool down and warm-ups, that's kind of the way that the class runs.
And, as martial artists, we're so used to teaching classes anyway that, there are some other locations here where people have kind of rotated and tried all of them. But they say here it's just so natural. You guys are so natural with people and the activities that you do for us. And that's just because we teach martial arts. So it's the Rocksteady program is really open to any program is able to teach it, but we are finding that martial arts schools are probably the most equipped and have the most experience and tend to grow the quickest because, again, we're used to having that clientele, working with people.
Yeah, and I think that's the part sort of to underscore here is that, actually, there's another piece of this that you didn't mention that I wanted to submit, and again, modify my statement if I say anything that's inaccurate, but one of the pieces of this that's a little bit that I find really interesting is that the more advanced folks, and what I mean by advanced is the folks who are more advanced in the disease, they come basically to train with an assistant, right? With sort of a medical, I don't say medical, but with like a nurse type of a person, right? Someone who typically takes care of them at home or who helps them, when they go out in the community. And so truthfully, this is not one of the things that I'm trying to sort of address here is this concern that I might have that's, well, I'm not really sure how to handle folks who, fall into this category. And boy, it sounds like it's a lot of labor. It's a lot of specialized knowledge and stuff like that. When the truth is, if you're a good martial arts instructor, this is more like guiding a kickboxing class than it is, really in the weeds, foot bladed, hip at 40 degrees, toes pointed down, super precise martial arts techniques. This is more like a fitness program. It's more like a fitness class, and with a lot of assistance from other folks. So it's not a huge instructor burden really at all, right? I mean, is that how you'd categorize this? And you're probably muted again for some reason. No idea why, but you're not now.
Hello, I'm back.
Okay, great.
The first class that I teach, I call it PD 3 and 4, and they're basically those who are a high risk of falling. They have balance issues. They may be in a walker. Some may be walking freely, but I require that they bring someone with them. And most of the time, they've already got someone with them, their spouse. Most times it's their spouse, or it's a child, their son, which is probably 40s or 50s, or so. They usually have somebody anyway that takes care of them, so they become their cornermen, and I do require that they bring them, so that way they can make sure that they get from station to station, that they get the water when they need to. They help put the boxing gloves on. What I get to do is actually just keep the pace moving, tell them what I'd like for them to do, keep the music, kind of like be the cheerleader. I'm moving everybody around and keeping them motivated, but it's really those cornermen, those caregivers, that are the ones that are really keeping everybody moving. So that takes a lot off of having to staff up with a lot of people. You just need 1 or 2 people, depending on the size of the class. The second class, they have no they don't have the same risk of balance. They're running. They're already athletes. They're walking. They're still working. You basically just, you could run that yourself because they don't require anybody to have to be with them. So staffing-wise, you'd be amazed. You don't really have to have a big staff, and you will find that people are going to want to volunteer. So that's going to kind of, feed into it as well.
Yeah, I think that really was my point. Is it's not, one might think when considering something like this that it would be very, sort of personal, one-on-one intensive, and it'd be very difficult to have a class with 20 or 30 people in it, but it really isn't. You have plenty of assistants, and in most cases there's someone that they're comfortable with that are helping coach them anyway. So it's kind of a really good kind of a fit. We're running out of time here, but I wanted to mention one more thing real quick, and boy, we still have like a huge section of this list to get through, so this may have to wait for another day. But I've got one of the headlines that you guys got in the community section here in October this year, in fact, and I thought this was an interesting, when I saw it, I thought it was an interesting sample. I'm kind of showing it on the screen right now. It basically says, your community. It says, martial arts school reflects on 30 years in Kingswood. I wouldn't want to make a wager on this necessarily, but for 99.9999% of the cases, just because your business has been around for a lot of years doesn't really thrill the media really at all, right? And so, my point is kind of buried here a little bit, but my premise is this, and I'd like to know if you agree or disagree with me. But my premise is, had you not become, what I call Rolodex status, right? You're not in the reporter's Rolodex. You're not sort of on a first name basis with the key people at the paper, the key people in news. Had you not done that, had you not done all this community outreach, had you not done, had you not dug deep roots in the community and been this sort of pillar in the area, that story probably doesn't really resonate with their readers very much. But since you have, now you put yourself in a position to when that reporter, when that writer needs to fill column inches, you're on the list, right? I mean,
Well, that's exactly how this 30-year column came out.
Is that right? Is that right?
We let Melanie know back maybe in May of this year. We said, this is our 30th year. And she was like, wow, that's amazing. And didn't really approach her doing a story yet. We just said, this is our 30th year. And she did a story, a different story back for us in April, on a hit league that I started, which is the professional taekwondo fighting. We had an exhibition fight at our local tournament. And when I had invited her out, she does the paper. Well, she reaches out to us a little while ago, and then Renee kind of emails her and said, oh, we probably want to do a 30-year thing. And she calls back and talks to me and says, I would love to do a 30-year for y'all, because I think knowing pioneers in any industry is amazing. Well, I didn't give her those words, and when she said it, I didn't think really, I just thought of it as a compliment. But in her mind, because we have done so many things and for such a long period of time, she puts us at a pioneer status, which in any industry is admirable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we hadn't actually discussed that before. It's interesting that that's actually how the story came about. But again, for most business operators, look, every human being, right? We all have our own ego. And all of us say we don't, but we all do. And the things that are compelling to us, the things that we think are interesting and cool, oftentimes aren't to other folks, right? I mean, that's just the nature of human behavior. But this type of a thing, there are let's not say always, but almost every day, these guys have to fill so much space that unless something really big happens in your community, they've got column inches to fill, right? And they've got this stack of releases on their desk, and they're sorting through that, and they're trying to find things that are compelling or that are interesting or that are going to help them gain more advertisers or more readers. And when you put yourself in the position that you guys have put yourself in, these types of things can happen for you when ordinarily they'd, I don't want to say be out of the question, but be very, very, very difficult to get done. Right. So right now, just as an example, we're running a minute or two over time here. I apologize for that. But just as an example, right now, we've done the big candy drive for the troops in Afghanistan and Iraq and overseas thing after the Halloween season. We've done it every year, probably for 15 years. And every year we get a little blurb in the news. Some years it's bigger than others, depends on how many inches they have to fill, right? Every year we do, at the end of the year, the toy drive for in fact, the girl I was describing earlier, the girl that had neuroblastoma, she lived at Shands Children's Hospital for about 3 years beating that cancer. So every year we do a big toy drive for Shands. And we've turned that into a big business-to-business promotional item. We work with all the local banks and restaurants and things like that as toy drop-off locations, and we facilitate the whole thing. And we'll take up literally semi-truck loads of toys to the Children's Hospital. So again, another example that we're sort of in the community and doing these newsworthy things that are newsworthy because of the human interest angle, right? So one would do themselves a great service to think about all of those areas in their business, areas in their community where they can be of service that also have a media angle, and then get good at writing releases, get good at knowing all the people in your local media so that you can get this type of coverage and help grow the school. I mean, look, no margin, no mission, right? If the school can't exist on its own and spin off enough revenue to make everybody happy, then it doesn't have a reason to exist, right? I mean, it can't exist. It can't pay its bills. So, if we've got this, if we have this strategy in our quiver, we should be firing those arrows as often as we humanly can. Anything that you'd augment on that, guys, before we call it a day? I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you, sort of spending all this time with us. I wish we could have gotten further down the list, frankly, but I always try to, end these things right at about 2:00. Anything that we missed or anything that you think we should underscore? And you're probably muted again. Hang on. I can fix it. No idea why. How about now?
Perfect. Only one thing that I would like to, mention is if somebody out there is thinking about doing a Rocksteady and they're questioning the pricing and how that, that all works, everybody, they either have or they don't have the means. We don't have to convince somebody like we do the martial arts. Right. And most of this clientele, they've all been in business or own businesses, or they've gone through they understand margin. They understand, this is what it costs. Understood. Here. So we don't have to fight that. The only time that you have to cross that barrier is if somebody does not have the means. But if they have the means, we've not had one person say, well, that's a little expensive. We've actually had the opposite a couple times.
Well, when you compare it to the type of physical therapy that these folks probably have been recommended, right? It's probably a fraction. I mean, does that sound right?
That's a very fair statement.
Yeah, I remember in my own schools, I had several folks. We were somewhat close to a local hospital, and of course, that became a big relationship that I wanted to create. And I ended up with several radiologists and physical therapists and things like that as students, and that was something that always stuck with me. That they would say all the time was, they're like, geez, all the stuff that we're doing here is the stuff that we have our clients. A lot of the things that we're doing are the things that we have our clients do in physical therapy, and you're like a third of the price. Now, of course, I had to go ratchet up the price points, but other than that, I mean, it's a hell of a bargain, frankly. Okay, great. Well, guys, thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate it. I know our folks got a lot out of our time today. Now, I'm going to put this video up on our members' website as well. Anybody, again, who has any interest at all in thinking about what this Rocksteady program can do, rocksteadyboxing.org is the site. I'll email everybody a link to this, and anybody who's on the chat now, just put a little comment in there, and I'll send it out to you as well. And also, if you want some copies of press releases that are already working well, or that have worked in the past, or that follow the format that media agencies really want to see this stuff in, post your email in the comment section or send me an email, and I'll be happy to send those things out to you. It's a little bit of a game that you got to play. You just have to learn how to play by their rules, and they're much, much, much more excited and likely to cover your events or your stories if it comes in the format that they want to see. So guys, again, thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate it. And for everybody joining us, Thanks again for your time. I know how busy you all are. I know how busy we all are, but taking this hour and blocking that time out to work on your business, not just working in your business, is so critically important. And I'm glad that that I've had and our guests have had some ability to contribute to that today. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.